The moon hung low, casting ghostly shadows over the quiet fields of Cedar Valley. It was a crisp autumn night, and the air crackled with tension. In the sprawling cosmos above, stars twinkled like distant diamonds, unaware of the turmoil brewing on the earth below. Old Eli Thompson, a rugged farmer with calloused hands, stood on the worn porch of his weather-beaten farmhouse, eyes scanning the horizon. The night felt different, charged with an electricity he couldn't quite explain, an instinct gnawing at him. Far off in the distance, torches flickered toward the edges of his property. They were coming closer. Eli's heart sank. He knew who they were: highwaymen. They were a ruthless crew known for terrorizing farmers along the outskirts of town, taking what they wanted without thought, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. He recalled the stories whispered around the tables and taverns, tales of fear and bravery. But tonight, it was not some other farmer's plight. It was his turn to face the storm. As the shadows drew closer, Eli's breath quickened. 5 figures emerged, their outlines dark against the night sky, their jeers slicing through the stillness like daggers. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man named Rusty, flashed a crooked grin, revealing yellowed teeth, a bane to farmers for far too long. Eli Thompson, out here all alone, huh? A chill wrapped around Eli like an old coat. Fear threatened to grip him, but something deeper surged within, a sense of defiance. He stepped forward, his voice steady, even as the fear bubbled beneath. "I'm not afraid of you, Rusty," he replied, oak solid. Rusty chuckled, but the laughter twisted in his throat. "Oh, but you see, Eli, it's not really about what we take. It's about what you have, the yield of your land, the fruits of your labor." The moonlight illuminated the scruffy faces of the gang, their eyes gleaming with malice. Eli could feel their hunger, their greed. Time stood still as the reality set in. These men were not just thieves, they were predators, but Eli had something they hadn't counted on: a plan. He shifted his weight, instinctively reaching for the old shovel leaning against the porch. "You want my crops." He raised the shovel, and it felt right in his hands, like an extension of his will. Rusty's laughter fell silent, replaced by a glint of surprise. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." The gang advanced, but Eli stood firm, heart pounding like a hammer against iron. He knew he had one advantage: the land itself. It sprawled out before him like a battlefield, every inch familiar. Eli had spent years nurturing this soil, coaxing life from its depths. He wasn't about to let these marauders trample it with their greed. With the moon illuminating his resolve, Eli drove the shovel into the earth, creating a mighty thud that sliced through the tense air. "Come on then." Rusty's bravado faltered as he hesitated, surveying the land. But Eli's defiance ignited a fire within him that burned hot. "This isn't just a story, Rusty." Without warning, Eli pivoted, leaping onto the old wooden fence that surrounded his property, eyes fixed on the towering oak tree at the edge of his land, a tree that held secrets, a history that breathed a life of its own. It was weathered yet strong, its branches stretching skyward, as stalwart as Eli's spirit. He climbed without hesitation, the cool bark rough against his skin. The highwaymen exchanged glances, bewildered. One murmured, scratching his head. Eli reached the first branch, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He crouched low, using the cover of darkness to his advantage. He knew the tree was near the edge of a ravine that cradled steep slopes and thick brush. Rusty demanded, the question hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Eli smirked, envisioning his next move. With that, he took a deep breath and launched himself from the branch, landing with a thud behind the startled men. Dust exploded around him as he turned, swinging the shovel in a sweeping arc. The blade clanked against the nearest highwayman, catching him off guard. A gasp escaped his lips as he stumbled backward. The other men immediately snapped to attention, eyes wide with surprise. Eli taunted, the fire of his spirit igniting their fear. A surge of adrenaline pulsed through him. With courage, he swung the shovel again, forcing another man back, adrenaline and righteousness fueling his every move. Each clash echoed like a war drum, a testament to his fierce determination. Rusty, realizing his folly, shouted, "Retreat! We'll come back when it's dark." But Eli wasn't finished. "You come back and I'll be ready." As the highwaymen scrambled toward the darkness, their resolve fracturing under the weight of his fierce spirit, Eli's heart swelled with victory, but he didn't let his guard down. He knew that their empty threats would linger, gnawing at him like hungry shadows stalking the edge of his property. He spent the next few days fortifying his defenses, rallying the other farmers in Cedar Valley, sharing his story and the courage he had found within himself. What happened that night isn't just my battle, it's our battle. Their faces broke from fear to fierce determination as the men and women of Cedar Valley gathered at his farmhouse, united in purpose. Eli taught them how to protect their field set traps along the roads, build barriers with wooden stakes, and prepare themselves for an inevitable confrontation with the highwaymen. The nights changed. They became filled with camaraderie, the glow of campfires flickering against the encroaching darkness. They shared stories of their fears and their dreams, weaving bonds of trust that merged into a collective strength, a strength that thrummed like the heartbeat of Cedar Valley itself. Days turned into weeks, and their efforts began to pay off. Rumors spread. The highwaymen, believing they were feared and unbeatable, now found themselves whispered about at local taverns, much more frequently than the tales they spun about themselves. As Eli stood with his fellow farmers one night, a sense of determination enveloped him. He gazed out into the fields, where the wheat now waved gently in the breeze, resilience echoing through every blade. He was a farmer, yes, but he had become so much more. He was a protector of the land, a guardian of what he held dear. When the next moonrise painted the sky silver once more, Eli and his fellow farmers awaited their return, ready to stand against whatever came their way. And sure enough, on a fateful night, the flicker of torches once again glowed on the brow of the hill. But this time it was different. Eli and his comrades stood shoulder to shoulder, their shovels and pitchforks raised high, hearts beating in sync. They were no longer mere farmers, but a united front, unyielding in their hearts. Eli watched as Rusty appeared at the forefront, swaggering toward them. "Thought you'd frighten us off with a few stories." His bravado attempted to mask the unease creeping in. Eli's voice boomed, resonating like a rallying cry. "We fought back once and we'll do it again." The highwaymen hesitated, the weight of their audacity slipping. Rusty's bravado flickered, and an uneasy silence draped over the group, tension coiling tighter with every passing second. Then, as if orchestrated by fate, Eli took the first step forward. He called out, fire blazing in his eyes, and in that moment the tide shifted. The highwaymen, no longer the hunters, felt the sting of fear dart through them. One by one they turned, abandoning their claims. Just like that, they retreated back into the shadows, leaving behind the whispers of what could have been. Victory hung in the air like a sweet scent, filling the night with serenity. Eli glanced at his fellow farmers, their faces lit with triumph. They had fought back together. They had stood tall against the odds, against their fears, and in doing so had woven a tale of courage that would be told for generations. The land was no longer just soil. It had become a bastion of hope. And as they all stood together, hearts intertwined, in that moment under the moon's watchful gaze, Eli knew this was just the beginning. As long as he had his land, as long as they had each other, nothing could push them out. They were the guardians of their legacy, unbreakable and bold. The highwaymen might have tested them, but they had learned that sometimes the fiercest battles reveal the true strength of the human spirit. And from that day forward, the story of Eli Thompson, the farmer who wouldn't back down, became woven into the very fabric of Cedar Valley. It was a tale of resilience, a testament to the unyielding power of hope and community, a reminder that, when faced with darkness, even the simplest among us can rise to become extraordinary. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the farmland of Cedar Grove in hues of orange and purple. In the stillness of dusk, the air buzzed with life, a symphony of crickets serenading the coming night. But in one corner of this serene landscape, a storm was brewing. Old Tom Braddock, a weathered farmer with a heart as vast as his fields, surveyed his land, a patchwork of green and gold, ripe with crops waiting for harvest. But even as he admired his hard-won bounty, anxiety gnawed at him like a hungry coyote lurking at the edge of the woods. He could feel it in his bones, a shadow creeping ever closer, the notorious highwaymen who had haunted these parts for far too long. Their reputation was carved from fear and violence, like whispers woven into the very fabric of the night. Tom snapped his gaze to the horizon, the last sliver of sunlight slipping away. He clenched his fists, already planning for what he knew was coming. For years he'd watched helplessly as neighbor after neighbor lost their farms, shattered dreams left to wither like autumn leaves. But Tom was not one to yield without a fight. He had raised his family on this land, tended to its soil, and cultivated every inch with love and sweat. This was his life, his legacy, and he would not let it be taken from him. Suddenly, a distant flicker of light caught his attention, a torch held high, a beacon signaling the arrival of men whose hearts were as black as their intentions. The sound of rough laughter drifted through the air, chilling Tom's spine. The highwaymen were here. Without hesitation, he grabbed his trusty shovel, weathered yet resilient, an extension of his will. He stepped off the porch, heart racing, and moved toward the edge of his property. The moonlight illuminated his path, a silvered sword against the encroaching darkness. As the figures drew closer, their sneering faces became clear. Leading the gang was a burly man with a grizzled beard and eyes that gleamed with malice. Jack Scar Donovan, a name whispered with dread throughout the countryside. Jack bellowed, swaggering toward Tom as if he owned the very soil beneath his feet. A lonely farmer standing guard over his little kingdom. Tom's grip tightened around the shovel, his resolve unwavering. Jack smirked. He knew the power of intimidation. "Oh, we're not here to fight, old man. We just want what's ours. You see, you've got a magnificent crop growing here." It was a threat, plain and simple. Fear danced in the back of Tom's mind, but he'd learned long ago that fear could be a powerful motivator. It could either paralyze you or fuel your fire. He could feel the flames flickering to life deep within him. "I won't let you bully me." "I'll defend my home," Tom declared, his voice steady despite the fear pooling in his stomach. Jack's eyes narrowed. "Defend it? Against whom?" "Against us." He motioned to the other highwaymen, rugged men with hardened faces, and they laughed, a sound that echoed like a death knell. But then, right there in the face of their laughter, an idea sparked in Tom's mind, brilliant, daring, and filled with risk. He'd seen his father employ a clever strategy once when faced with thieves. It was about using the land to your advantage, turning the very soil that sustained him into a weapon of protection. In that instant, an idea crystallized. He had no intention of confronting them in a straight-up fight. No, they would never expect what he was about to do. Tom could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, mingling with determination. He took a deep breath and spoke, voice low but sharp. "You want my crops?" Jack paused, curiosity piqued, a glimmer of intrigue playing across his features. "A deal," Tom smiled, a deep, confident grin that held a secret. He strode toward the cornfield, heart pounding with anticipation. "Let's see if you can outsmart me. I'll challenge you to a game. If you win, you can take whatever you want. But if I win, you leave this land for good." The highwaymen exchanged glances, uncertain murmurs rippling through them. Jack's grin faltered, the allure of the challenge beginning to weave its spell, but with a twist. "You hide and I'll find you. You have until the first light of dawn to escape this land, and if you can evade me," he paused for dramatic effect, "I'll let you take what you want." Jack let out a hearty laugh, the sound of it bouncing off the trees. "You think you can find us?" But Tom stood tall, unwavering. "I know this land better than you know yourself, Jack." A tense silence filled the space between them, thick as fog. Tom sensed the hesitation, the wavering confidence of a man who never expected to be challenged in this way. At last Jack nodded, and the challenge was set. With a flick of his hand, Tom counted down from 10. He called out, each number echoing like a drumbeat in the still night air. The highwaymen scattered, sprinting away into the darkness like shadows fanning out to escape the light. Tom could hear their laughter dissipate, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind. He continued, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just a game. It was a stand, a clash of wills. Tom cast his eyes over the fields, imagining where each man might hide, the landscape transformed into a maze of possibilities. The oak tree stood tall against the dark, a sentinel of secrets. He thought of the old barn behind him, a treasure trove of crevices and pockets where they might conceal themselves. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs. Then with a commanding shout he said, 10. He launched himself into the fields, heart pounding in rhythm with each swift step. The moonlight poured over him, illuminating the path he knew like the back of his hand. First he darted toward the barn, muscles coiled tight with anticipation. With a swift motion he pushed open the creaky door. Dust danced in the moonlight, motes shimmering as they floated. He scanned the shadows, searching, listening. And then through the stillness he heard it, a barely audible whisper, a shuffle of movement behind a stack of hay bales. Tom barely smirked. He had found his first target. With a sudden burst of agility, he lunged forward, grabbing the highwayman by the collar, pulling him into the open. He roared, adrenaline surging through his veins. The man's face paled, eyes wide with fear. Tom knew the scent of panic well. As he marched the captured highwayman back to the open, he felt a new surge of confidence. "Next," he growled, scanning the landscape again. Not far away, he spotted footprints leading into the thicket of trees on the edge of his property. With determination, he forged ahead. He stepped softly, mind racing, heart working, on the prowl like a predator. With each footfall, he remembered every lesson his father had taught him about the land, about understanding the rhythms of nature and the heartbeat of his fields. The rustling leaves filled his ears like the battle drums of old. Suddenly, another figure slipped from behind a nearby tree, trying to make a break for it. But Tom was quick, faster than the highwayman had calculated. He dove forward, tackling the man to the ground. He yelled, exhilaration rippling through him. Beneath the cloak of the night, he continued the hunt, shadow and spirit entwined. Minutes turned into an hour, and the thrill of the challenge pulsed through him. He caught another and another. One by one, the highwaymen fell, their faces revealing the disbelief at being cornered by a farmer who knew the land like his own heartbeat. Finally, only Jack remained, hidden in the far reaches of the dense woods. Sweat dripped from Tom's brow, but he pressed on, the fire in his soul igniting brighter. He could feel the victory closing in. He challenged, voice booming, cutting through the stillness. "You can't run forever." As if summoned by his words, a rustle stirred nearby. Tom moved in close, every instinct honed like a finely sharpened blade. In a swift motion, he darted into the underbrush, drawing in a breath strong enough to surge him forward. And there he was, Jack, crouched against a tree, looking down at the ground, trying to blend into the shadows. Tom lunged, grabbing him by the collar. "There's nowhere to hide, Jack." With that embrace of capture, a harsh truth settled over them. Jack's bravado dissolved, leaving behind the frightened man beneath the mask of a thief. "Let me go, old man," he whispered, fear etching lines across his face. "A chance," Tom retorted, pulling him into the open light. The moon hung heavy above them, a silent witness to the victory that had been fought on this land. As dawn broke over Cedar Grove, casting a soft golden hue over the fields, the highwaymen, now humbled and wearied, sat on the edge of Tom's farm. They had come as men of menace, but they left as shadows, defeated not just by a farmer but by the resilience of a community. Tom's heart raced as he finally exhaled, relief washing over him. He had faced the storm, and against the odds, he had emerged victorious. He gathered his neighbors, those whose spirits had been dimmed by the threats of the highwaymen, and together they rejoiced in the victory born from unity and courage. "This land isn't just mine," Tom addressed them, gazing at the faces of those who had once cowered in fear. "It's ours." Applause erupted around him, laughter dancing through the fields as the sun rose higher. The fear that had once settled like a thick shroud lifted, replaced by hope and the promise of new beginnings. Tom Braddock had shown them all that one man, with a strong heart and an unwavering spirit, could make a difference. The bonds forged in that moment extended beyond the triumph over the thief. They forged a community that would rise together to face whatever challenges awaited them in the future. And as the day bloomed bright and fresh, the spirit of Cedar Grove stood strong, a testament to the idea that sometimes, when pushed to the edge, one can fight back with cleverness, bravery, and unity. The shadows would now have to think twice before encroaching on these fields again. In Cedar Grove, at least for now, the highwaymen were but a distant memory, defeated and rooted not by violence, but by a simple farmer's cunning heart. The sun hung just above the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields of Maple Grove. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath. In the midst of this stillness stood Henry Lawson, a farmer in his 40s, rugged and worn from years of labor on the land he loved. He wiped the sweat from his brow and squinted at the trees lining his property. Something didn't sit right. Suddenly, the sound of hooves thundered through the air. Henry's heart raced as he turned to see a band of figures galloping toward him, men dressed in dark leather, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats. They were highwaymen, notorious for terrorizing farmers throughout the region. Their reputation was etched in fear, a deep-seated dread that had crept into the hearts of every villager. Henry had seen it before: neighbors retreating, farms left abandoned, lives reduced to whispers. But today was different. Today, he wouldn't run. The leader of the gang, a rough-looking man with a scar running down his cheek, raised his hand, signaling for the others to halt. He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth that seemed to reflect an insatiable greed. Henry took a deep breath, standing tall despite the apprehension coiling in his gut. "You're not taking anything from me, Scar." Scar laughed, a dark, unsettling sound that sent chills down Henry's spine. "Oh, we're not here to fight. We're here to take what's rightfully ours." Anger bubbled up in Henry's chest. He thought of his family, the years of toil and sweat it took to make this land flourish. He thought of his children watching from the porch, eyes wide with worry. Fear gripped the community, squeezing it tighter every day. But as fear surged through him, something else ignited determination. Henry's voice rang out, bold and steady. "This ends today." Scar's expression shifted, curiosity now mixing with his arrogance. "You think you're tough, old man?" In that moment, an idea flickered in Henry's mind, bold and audacious. This wasn't merely about fighting, it was about using cunning over brute force. He had watched his father once outsmart a rival in a similar showdown, using nothing but the land itself as an ally. Henry asked, trying to keep his voice calm, even as adrenaline coursed through him. Scar raised an eyebrow. "A deal." "Let's play a game," Henry proposed, an edge of mischief creeping into his voice. "If you win, you can take what you want. If I win, you leave this land for good." The rest of the gang shifted, glancing at each other with a mixture of confusion and intrigue. Scar stroked his beard, contemplating. "Hide and seek. You hide, I'll find you. You have until dawn. If I catch you, you leave." Scar chuckled, a sound dripping with mockery. "I know this land better than you ever will," Henry replied, steeling himself. The air hung heavy with uncertainty. Scar's bravado faltered and a glimmer of doubt flickered in his eyes. "Fine, you've got yourself a deal." Henry counted down 1, 2, and he heard the gang disperse like leaves in the wind, each man darting into the woods surrounding his farm, their laughter fading into the shadows. He dashed into the depths of his land, the moon casting silver light across the fields. The groves whispered secrets only he understood, guiding him as he moved like a predator on the hunt. First, he headed toward the barn, old and creaky, where darkness clung like a thick fog. He approached with careful steps, listening intently. At the barn's entrance, he hesitated for just a moment, pressing his ear against the worn wood. A rustle. Henry smiled, adrenaline surging through him as he swung open the door with a creak. Inside, shadows intertwined, but he could see a form shifting among the hay bales. With a swift motion, he lunged forward, grabbing one of the gang members before he could react. Henry's voice boomed, triumph flooding his senses as the man struggled to break free. The highwayman's face clouded with panic. He shouted, but Henry held his grip firm. "First one caught," Henry declared, ushering him out into the light. As they exited, the moon shone brighter, illuminating the field like a spotlight, and Henry instinctively looked toward the trees. He could sense another highwayman hiding nearby. The thrill propelled him forward, every muscle in his body focused on the hunt. He raced to the edge of the woods, glancing around for any signs of movement. Then, there, a figure darted through the underbrush, not far from where he stood. With a burst of energy, he charged after the man, who scrambled to avoid capture, but Henry was relentless. Now breathing heavily, he finally caught up, grasping the man's coat and pulling him to a halt. He shouted, elated beyond measure. 2 down, 3 to go. The thrill of the chase had become intoxicating, each capture filling him with more confidence. With determination in his heart, he dashed deeper into the woods, the moon providing a pathway through the dark. Minutes passed like heartbeats as he pressed on. The world around him seemed to fade, and the playful whispers of wind felt like allies cheering him forward. He spotted someone trying to sneak behind a large tree. Henry couldn't help but laugh, grinning widely as he approached. Before his next capture, he contemplated the wisdom his father had imparted about knowing the land. This wasn't about the brute force that the highwaymen were accustomed to. This was about strategy. The very soil he tilled contained his strength. As he captured the next two with ease, the tension shifted. Clarity sharpened his focus, and he could feel the tide turning in his favor. Scar would not look so fierce later when faced with defeat. Finally, it was down to Scar. Only one remained, and the thrill of the hunt surged through him like electricity. The moon was reaching its zenith, illuminating the last remnants of light as Henry zeroed in on the last hiding spots. He knew Scar wouldn't let himself be easily captured. Henry moved carefully, his senses heightened. Minutes ticked away, and the world around him was now silent save for the rustle of his footsteps. Every creak of a branch felt like a drumbeat in his ears. Then, just when he began to worry that Scar might have slipped away, he heard a soft sound of branch snapping underfoot. Henry held his breath, heart racing as he turned toward the noise. There he was, Scar, lurking behind thick bushes, shadows flickering across his face. Scar spat, attempting to regain his bravado, but even he couldn't hide the tinge of fear lurking in his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his tough exterior. Henry declared, charging forward and closing the distance between them. Scar turned to run, but Henry was faster, fueled by the urgency of the moment, the desire to protect everything he held dear. In one fluid motion, he tackled Scar to the ground, pinning him beneath the weight of his own resolve. Scar turned, breathless, the realization dawning upon him. He rasped, desperation creeping into his voice. "Like this," Henry replied firmly. "You and your gang have wreaked havoc on harder-working folks for too long. This land is not yours to take." As dawn broke, hues of pink and orange streaked across the sky, the world coming alive with light and possibility. Scar squirmed but found no escape. He looked defeated, but Henry's spirit soared. He had faced the odds and won, not by brawn but by cleverness and sheer determination. With every member of the highway troop captured, Henry felt his fear transform into strength. As the sun began to cast its golden light across Maple Grove, he gathered the others, sharing a sense of victory unlike any they had experienced before. Tom, the elder farmer from a neighboring plot, was the first to speak up. "You've shown us all something today, Henry." A chorus of agreement followed, voices rising in unity. The fear that had once settled like a heavy fog over the land began to lift, replaced now with renewed hope. They were no longer individuals watching their lives crumble. Together, they had become a force, a unity forged under the weight of adversity. Henry faced the group, heart racing with pride. "As long as we stand together, as long as we protect our home, we can take on anything. These men won't return." And as the sunlight streamed over the fields, the shadows of the past began to dissolve. Henry looked around at the faces of those he had fought for, seeing not just friends but a community reborn. Maple Grove would remain a sanctuary, a place where hard work and courage prevailed over greed and intimidation. The lesson was clear. United, they were stronger than any highwayman. They were farmers, guardians of the land, and they were here to stay. From that day on, Maple Grove flourished like never before, a testament to resilience, unity, and the undying spirit of a farmer willing to fight for what was right. The chilling laughter of highwaymen echoed only as a distant memory, but the story of that fateful night lived on, inspiring those who came after to stand strong against adversity. And in the heart of every farmer in Maple Grove, a truth arose. Sometimes, the fiercest battles are not fought with swords and guns, but with determination, cunning, and the bonds forged in the spirit of community. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting silvery shadows across the vast fields of Oak Hollow. A cool breeze whispered secrets between the rustling leaves, but for one man, the stillness felt anything but peaceful. Jacob Hart, a farmer with weathered hands and a heart full of grit, leaned against his barn, eyes fixed on the horizon. He had heard the tales of highwaymen who roamed these parts, striking fear into the hearts of those who labored to carve a life from the land. With the harvest just days away, the last thing he wanted was to lose everything he had worked for. Suddenly, a distant sound broke through the calm. The thunder of hooves echoed, growing louder like drums in the silent night. Jacob's pulse quickened. He knew what was coming. Without a moment's hesitation, he darted to the porch, clutching his old rifle, a family heirloom that had seen plenty of hard times. He had vowed never to take a life, but tonight he would protect his. As the riders emerged from the darkness, they were a fearsome sight. 5 men on powerful horses, cloaked in leather, their faces shrouded by shadow. Their leader, a towering figure with cold eyes, raised his hand. He said, voice thick with taunting. Jacob squared his shoulders, forcing himself to stand tall. "This is my land." The leader laughed, a brutal, hollow sound. He gestured dismissively to the rifle in Jacob's hands. They advanced, the scent of danger thickening the air, igniting a fire in Jacob's chest. He thought of his family, of his crops, of the dreams he'd spun in the twilight hours as he worked the soil. That fire became determination. The men paused, surprise flickering in their eyes. Jacob's defiance had caught them off guard. The moment hung in the air, charged with tension, but Jacob knew he needed more than courage. He needed a plan. The idea struck him like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the darkness of the approaching threat. He recalled the clever tricks his father had used, ways to deceive and outsmart bigger threats. "How about this, a game?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. The leader asked, intrigued but still arrogant. "Hide and seek," Jacob proposed, his heart hammering. "You hide, I seek. If I find you by sunrise, you leave this land for good." The highwaymen exchanged wary glances, the leader considering the absurdity of it all. "Because you think you're clever," Jacob replied, the words spilling out more confidently than he felt. "But I know these fields better than you know your own name." Laughter erupted from the gang, but it was a nervous laughter, edged with uncertainty. When had they ever been challenged like this? The leader's bravado faltered, curiosity growing. "You're on, farmer." Jacob took a step back, adrenaline surging through him as he began counting. 1, 2. The highwaymen scattered like shadows, disappearing into the embrace of the trees. Jacob's stomach churned as the fear of the unknown bubbled within him, but he clung to his determination. This wasn't just a challenge, it was an opportunity. 4, 5. His heart raced, pulse pounding in his ears. The land belonged to him, roots deep in his family's history, and he was not about to let it slip away. The words echoed in the stillness, filled with a mixture of fear and hope, and he charged into the darkness, the rifle slung over his shoulder. The moon illuminated the path ahead, and Jacob moved swiftly, every sense heightened. He thought of all the places the highwaymen could hide. He first headed toward the old barn, knowing well that they would underestimate its shadows. Stepping into the barn, he felt an electric charge. Every creak of the wooden floorboards whispered secrets of long-held memories. The dusty smell of hay filled his nostrils. He flicked on the lantern, the warm glow illuminating the space. A shadow darted out from behind the bales, but Jacob was ready. In a swift motion, he lunged forward, capturing the first highwayman before he could escape. Jacob shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. He dragged the man out into the moonlight, the glimmer of his captured quarry making his heart soar with victory. The gang's laughter now felt like fading echoes, their confidence cracking. Jacob continued his search, breathing in the crisp night air as he pressed on. The moon became his ally. He moved towards the thickets lining the edge of his property, knowing well they would be hiding there, thinking they were clever enough to blend in. He exclaimed joyfully, capturing another man who had thought he could sneak away unnoticed. The thrill of the hunt fueled his courage, his heart swelling with each capture. The shadows deepened under the trees, and Jacob felt a shift in the air. The highwaymen were beginning to panic, and he could feel the tide of the game turning in his favor. He paused, heart pounding, allowing the tranquility of the night to fortify him. Then came a rustle behind him, the sound of hurried footsteps. Jacob turned to see another highwayman trying to make a break for it. He yelled, running after the man like a hound on a scent. With every ounce of strength, he surged forward, finally tackling the man to the ground, capturing him. Jacob announced triumphantly, the thrill surging through him. He could almost taste victory now, each capture fanning the flames of his determination. But Scar was still out there, and Jacob could already sense the final confrontation brewing. He raced back to the edge of the field, scanning every corner, every shadow. He shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. The stillness of the night enveloped him, only broken by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Then a glint of movement caught his eye there amongst the bushes. A figure tried to blend in. Jacob's heart soared. He slipped quietly closer, carefully stepping between the fallen leaves, each crackle echoing like thunder in his ears. With a sudden burst of speed, he darted forward, tackling Scar, pinning him against the ground. Jacob exclaimed, breathing heavily with exhilaration. Scar struggled, surprise etched across his face. He spat, his bravado crumbling. "We'll come back." "No," Jacob replied firmly, his heart racing. "You'll regret this. You thought you could take what's mine." With that, Jacob marched the defeated gang back to the barn, where they all stood, panting and frustrated. He gathered his neighbors, the very farmers Scar and his gang threatened, their faces filled with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Jacob faced them, feeling the weight of their hope resting upon his shoulders. His voice rose, passion weaving through every word. Cheers erupted among the farmers as they rallied around him, the fear receding like the darkness of night giving way to dawn. Jacob felt their strength, their collective spirit breathing life back into the fields they all cherished. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, the horses of the defeated highwaymen remained tethered to the post. Jacob stared at Scar, whose defiance had deflated, and said, "You came here for more than just crops. You wanted to take our spirit, to crush our fight." The gang slumped against the barn wall, defeated, realizing their game had backfired. They'd come to intimidate, but they had only found resistance. As the sunlight poured onto the fields and laughter erupted among the farmers, Jacob felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just about one man standing up against intimidation. This was about a community reclaiming its strength. Connections forged in fear had turned into bonds of bravery. The gang retreated, their shadows falling away in the light of a new day, leaving behind the whispers of their menace. In their defeat, they had ignited a fire, a determination that wouldn't die easily. Days rolled into weeks, and the story of Jacob Hart echoed through the town. He became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the strength that lay in unity. The farmers transformed their land, not only to cultivate crops, but to cultivate community, a network of support forged in the fires of adversity. Together, they built stronger defenses, shared knowledge, and forged deeper connections. The highwaymen became a distant memory, a warning to anyone who dared threaten the peace of Oak Hollow again. In the heart of every farmer echoed a truth. Sometimes, true bravery lies not in confrontation, but in the simple act of standing your ground, in the unity that springs forth from shared struggle. Jacob Hart had shown them all that when faced with darkness, they could rise as one. United, they would defend their homes, their families, and their legacies. And under the mighty sun of Oak Hollow, a new chapter began, guided by the values of resilience, courage, and community. The highwaymen had tried to push the farmer out, but Jacob Hart had a plan that transformed fear into strength and forged bonds that could weather any storm. The moonlight spilled over the fields of Green Valley like liquid silver, illuminating the rows of crops that blossomed under its watchful gaze. It was a quiet night, but the stillness was deceiving. Something sinister lurked in the shadows. In the heart of this idyllic landscape stood Frank Jenkins, a proud farmer, his hands calloused from years of toil, his heart heavy with worry. Just last week, whispers had slithered through the village dangerous men were on the prowl, men who robbed and terrorized those who worked the land. Frank leaned against the fence, gazing out over his fields, watching the wind sway the stalks of corn like a gentle lullaby. He had poured his soul into this land, raised his children here, and now a group of highwaymen threatened to sweep it all away. He could feel them coming, the chill of their malice creeping through the air. Suddenly, the distant thunder of hooves broke the night's serenity. Adrenaline surged through Frank's veins as he straightened up, squinting into the dark. 4 silhouettes emerged, galloping closer, their horses pounding against the earth like a war drum echoing through the silence. The leader, a tall figure with a weathered face and cruel eyes, led the charge, ravenous for power. Well, well. The leader taunted, pulling his horse to a halt just short of the farm. The other men snickered, their laughter slicing through the tension like a knife. Frank's heart raced, but he held his ground. "You're not welcome here," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear roiling inside him. The leader's grin widened, revealing crooked teeth. "What do you think you'll do?" He gestured dismissively at Frank's tools, scattered across the yard like relics of a bygone era. A flicker of anger ignited within Frank, and he realized this wasn't just about the crops, it was about his dignity. He couldn't show weakness, but as their laughter echoed, a desperate plan began to form in the back of his mind, one that would turn the tables. Frank was no stranger to using his surroundings to his advantage. He had spent years learning the lay of the land, and this time he would exploit that knowledge. Frank called out, surprising even himself with the boldness of his proposal. The highwaymen fell silent, confusion flickering in their eyes. The leader sneered, crossing his arms. "If I can find you before dawn, you leave my land for good." The men exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. It was a gamble, but Frank knew his land better than any thief ever could. The leader stepped forward, wariness giving way to intrigue. "All right, old man, you've got yourself a deal, but don't think we'll make it easy for you," he said. With that, Frank began counting, his voice steady and loud. 1, 2. The sound of hooves rushed away, the highwaymen dispersing into the dark. Frank's heart thumped in his chest, a mix of fear and a rise in adrenaline. Each number echoed around him as he counted down, the world narrowing to just him and the mission ahead. 4, 5. He held his breath, envisioning where the highwaymen might hide. It was now or never. He shouted, charging into the night, the rifle slung over his shoulder, a plan forming in his mind. First, he headed toward the sprawling cornfields. He ducked low, moving silently, listening for any sound that might give away their hiding places. The moon hung high above, illuminating his path as he maneuvered through the swaying stalks, the leaves whispering secrets. In the distance, he thought he heard a muffled laugh. Frank reached the edge of the field, his heart hammering as he crept up to the old barn. This had been a place of sanctuary for his family, but now it served as a battleground. He pushed open the creaky door, a sense of power surging through him. The dim light revealed shadows and shapes, each one a whisper of the past. He growled, searching every corner. In a rush of movement, he rounded the boxes stacked high with old tools and spotted the first highwayman trying to blend in. Frank lunged forward, grabbing the man by the collar and dragging him into the moonlight. Frank hollered victoriously. The man squirmed but was no match for Frank's resolve. He marched him outside, the fear in his eyes contrasting with Frank's newfound strength. That taste of victory ignited something inside him. He felt bolder, alive. He taunted, knowing very well that fear was now on their side. Continuing his search, Frank moved toward the edge of the property where the woods began. Shadows danced under the trees, and the air was thick with tension as he scanned for movement. He knew the terrain like the back of his hand. He suddenly shouted, tackling another highwayman who had thought he could escape through the underbrush. Adrenaline pumped through him, each capture lifting his spirit higher. This wasn't just a game. It was about protecting his home and restoring the dignity the highwayman had tried to strip away. With determination surging through him like wildfire, Frank pressed on. Minutes turned into an hour, and he felt the thrill of the chase electrifying the night air. He caught glimpses of movements, the nervous shifts of men hiding behind trees, branches snapping beneath their feet. Each time he forced their hand, the power shifted ever more in his favor. It was as if the land itself was guiding him, the roots beneath his feet anchoring him to the fight. With 3 captured, he knew he was closing in on Scar. The final confrontation loomed as he turned toward the old oak tree that stood as a silent guardian on his land. It had seen many seasons and had become a symbol of strength. Charging toward it, he crouched low, eyes scanning. And then came a rustle. Frank's heart raced as he honed in on the movement. Scar was hiding. With a sudden burst of energy, Frank sprang forward, surprising Scar, who was unprepared for the fierce farmer charging at him. Frank shouted triumphantly, pinning Scar to the ground. "You thought you could take what was mine, didn't you?" The The realization washed over Scar's face, brutal surprise mixed with an unmistakable fear. "You won't get away with this," he spat, projecting bravado that was thinly veiled. But Frank glared down at him, resolve hardening like steel. "Not if you don't make it out of here tonight." As dawn began to break, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, the remaining highwaymen stood by the barn watching the scene unfold. Frank felt the warmth of victory flooding his veins. The shadow of menace was lifted. These thieves were no longer the predators, they were cornered. He collected his captures one by one, herding them toward the porch, where he stood, chest heaving with triumph. The first rays of sunlight glinted on the faces of the men who had terrorized him. "You came here with threats, thinking you could instill fear," he said, voice firm. One by one, the other farmers emerged from their homes, gathered by the sound of the commotion. When they realized what Frank had done, all lit their faces. "Look at what he's done," was heard above the murmurs, and a sense of unity crackled like electricity in the air. They had been afraid, watching their crops dwindle under the threat of these men, but now Frank's triumph radiated strength. The fear that had once gripped them fell away, replaced with pride and determination to protect their own. Frank turned to them, gathering courage from their presence. "This land is ours." Cheers broke out among the farmers as they rallied around Frank, breaking down the barriers of fear that had plagued them for far too long. The men who had sought to undermine their lives were now vulnerable, stripped of their intimidation. As the sunlight poured over them, Frank faced Scar once more. "You brought this upon yourselves. You sought to destroy, to take what isn't yours. But today, you leave this land and you will never return." With a mixture of bitterness and realization, Scar and his men mounted their horses, defeated, the weight of their choices crashing down. They'd come to pillage, but instead had ignited a fire among the farmers, a fire that would not be extinguished. As they rode away, the farmers held their heads high, a newfound confidence blossoming in their hearts. Frank had not just defended his crops, he had united a community, transforming fear into a force that could withstand anything. Weeks turned into months, and the tale of Frank Jenkins morphed from a story of one man's struggle into an anthem of resilience. The farmers banded together, sharing advice, protecting each other's land and nurturing the bonds that had once been frayed. They had a stronghold of unity, a spirit that soared higher than any threat could reach. Frank maintained his farm, his pride swelling with every harvest, knowing that behind each blade of grass, a community thrived. They turned their struggles into strength, their hardship into hope, and beneath the very skies where shadows had once loomed, they found joy in their daily toil, laughter echoing through the fields. The lessons learned that fateful night guided them through seasons both harsh and gentle, the strength of unity, the power of courage, and a spirit unyielding against adversity. In Green Valley, the memories of that dark evening had transformed into stories of heroism. Children grew up hearing of Frank Jenkins, a farmer who had not only fought back but had inspired his community to rise and shine brighter than ever before. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting a final glow on the fields, Frank Jenkins knew that this was only the beginning. With every grain harvested, every crop tended, and every neighbor supported, he had planted a legacy growing deeper roots than he ever thought possible. This was home, and they would face any storm together, refusing to back down. The highwaymen had tried to push the farmer out, but with heart, cunning, and a vibrant community, Frank had shown them that resilience is a force to be reckoned with. The sun dipped low over the fields of Maplewood, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. As the day came to a close, a crisp wind rustled through the corn, whispering secrets of the approaching night. In the heart of this calm stood Benjamin Hart, a farmer in his 40s, grappling with a storm brewing just beyond his doorstep. He had seen the signs, the empty farms, the flickering fires left unattended, and the hushed conversations of fear hoping to stay hidden among the shadows. Tonight would be different, though. A distant sound shivered through the air, the thunder of hooves. Benjamin's gut twisted with dread, every instinct telling him trouble was near. He stepped off his porch and grabbed a worn wooden pitchfork, a relic from a bygone era, yet a symbol of his past struggles. He had fought too long, worked too hard, to let his life, his land, be taken like a phantom in the night. As the riders drew closer, the roar of laughter belied their grim intentions. 4 figures, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats, reined in their horses, eyes gleaming with mischief. The leader, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. "Oh, look what we found," he mocked, voice dripping with contempt. "Get off my land," Benjamin growled, feeling the weight of the earth beneath his feet, a grounding force against the chaos surrounding him. The scarred man laughed, a sound like gravel crunching underfoot. "And what will you do about it, old man?" He tilted his head back, sharing a cruel chuckle with his companions. In that dark moment, fear mingled with an ember of defiance deep inside Benjamin. He took a step forward, heart pounding. An unexpected silence hung in the air, a collective realization that perhaps they had underestimated him. The leader leaned on his saddle, curiosity flickering on his face. "Oh, you think you're brave?" And right then, a surge of inspiration rushed over Benjamin. Options flooded his mind, and he couldn't let the chance slip away. He remembered stories his father used to tell, tales of clever farmers who had outsmarted thieves with wit rather than force. What if he tried that? Benjamin proposed, drawing the attention of the men. "If I find you by dawn, you leave my land for good." The leader snorted, skepticism lacing his features. "A wager." "Hide and seek," Benjamin replied, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. "You 3 hide, I'll seek. You can use the whole area, but come sunrise, if I catch you, you leave for good." Trio exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into the bravado of their expressions. Though they were thieves, they were also men who were unwilling to risk losing a lucrative opportunity. "Fine," the leader said at last, licking his lips as if tasting the prospect of easy riches. With that, Benjamin began to count aloud. 1, 2. He watched as their faces fell, then turned to rush away, disappearing into the shadows of the approaching night. The adrenaline surged, igniting a flicker of hope within him. This wasn't just a game, it was a chance to reclaim his land. His heart beat loudly in his chest as he dashed toward the barn first. Inside, shadows danced under twilight, echoing years of labor, joy, and heartache. He moved stealthily, scanning corners and crevices. The musty scent of old hay filled his lungs as he fanned out, determined. He muttered, his instincts flaring. And there, a shadow shifted beneath a stack of hay. With a quick motion, Benjamin lunged, pulling out the first highwayman. He called, adrenaline coursing through his body. The man protested, but Benjamin didn't let go. He dragged him outside, feeling a surge of victory wash over him. "Let's see how many more I can catch," he mused, catching his breath and refocusing. Next, Benjamin moved toward the edge of his property, where the thickets grew thick and tangled. The rustling leaves seemed to mock him, whispering secrets of the men hiding within. He could almost hear the highwaymen's hearts beating, feel their unease. He shouted moments later as he grabbed another, surprised and panting for trying to escape through the underbrush. The thrill of the hunt lit a fire in Benjamin's chest. As each capture notched his victory, he felt a renewed strength surging through him, higher than the mountains that bordered his land. Moving deeper into the night, he maintained his focus, knowing time was not on his side. The inadequacies that once crept into his mind faded with every heartbeat, replaced by resolve. He could feel the hour slipping away, but determination paved his path. His father had always spoken about the power of knowing one's land, the ears to hear its whispers, the eyes to see its secrets. With the moonlight guiding him, he pressed on. Darting past the tree line, he paused, scanning the ground before him. Another shadow flickered behind a large oak. Benjamin saw the flicker of movement and sprinted toward it, heart racing. He couldn't let fear dictate this moment. Moments later, he emerged victorious again, capturing a 3rd highwayman. He shouted, exhilaration coursing through him, and all the while he kept searching, feeling ever closer to his goal. But the final capture wouldn't come easy. He knew Scar, their leader, wouldn't be hiding just anywhere. Scar was clever, and he would attempt to finish this game somewhere well concealed. Benjamin pushed through the woods, memories of childhood adventures flicking through his mind. Running through these very trees, he had experienced the thrill of discovery. He needed to channel that same spirit. Scar couldn't hide from him forever. Then through the darkness, he heard a rustle, a sound distinct from the bustling creatures of the night. There he was, Scar, pacing nervously, eyeing the escape route he hoped to take. Bounding forward, Benjamin seized the moment, tackling Scar before he had a chance to bolt. He shouted triumphantly, pinning him to the ground. Scar struggled, anger and desperation mingling in his eyes as he realized his fate. He spat. Through gritted teeth, Benjamin replied, "It is over." Scar's bravado waned and fright settled in. Benjamin gripped him tighter, refusing to let go of everything he had fought for. Dawn was beginning to break, illuminating the land in soft hues of gold. As the sun crested the horizon, casting away the shadows of the night, Benjamin felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. The highwaymen now stood stripped of their power, their arrogance transformed into a begrudging recognition of defeat. With the three captured and wrapped in his resolve, Benjamin marched them back to the porch, bright sunlight illuminating their faces now tinged with fear. "This is what happens when you think you can take from those who work hard. You underestimated me, and you underestimated this land," he proclaimed, his spirit soaring higher than the sun itself. As the captured men grimaced, their bravado melted away, the farmer stood tall, knowing he had reclaimed what was rightfully his. The fears that had once kept the community in shackles began to lift, replaced by the exhilarating taste of victory. Benjamin turned to the neighbors in the distance who had gathered, watching as a sense of unity swelled among them. In that moment it became clear that this wasn't just one man's battle, it was a victory for them all. He shouted, each word resonating with power and solidarity. Cheering erupted among the gathered farmers, joy and pride pouring over them like the morning sun spilling gold over the fields. They had witnessed the strength that came from standing united, refusing to yield. Frank, an old man from the neighborhood, stepped forward, his face lit with admiration. "You've shown us what it means to stand for our land, Benjamin." The throngs around him echoed their agreement, and the highwaymen, now mere shadows of their former selves, looked on, dispirited and humbled. And as Benjamin surveyed the crowd, laughter ringing through the air, chills ran down his spine. This was the spirit of Maplewood, and he was no longer fighting alone. They had forged a bond that would not be easily broken, a bond born from the flame of defiance. The highwaymen were escorted off the farm, their dreams of plunder crumbled into dust. As they roared away, the newly forged community stood victorious, united by one man's bravery and the resolve of many. Days turned into weeks, and the legend of Benjamin Hart spread throughout the region. He had fought against the shadows of intimidation and emerged with far more than just a victorious evening. He had woven a tapestry of solidarity and resilience, taking fearful farmers and turning them into warriors for their land. As the harvest approached, the celebration in Maplewood grew into something larger than just recognition for a clever farmer. It became a symbol of the power of communal strength, a reminder that when faced with adversity, the heart of a community shone brightest against the darkness. Frank's tales, once filled with trepidation, now illuminated the essence of courage, the belief that together they could face any storm. Even as the darker nights crept in, the farmers had grown stronger, more determined to protect what was theirs. In the fields of Maplewood, it wasn't just crops that grew. Bonds flourished, and every ear of corn stood as a testament to resilience. The sun set low on the horizon, bathing the community in a golden glow, as laughter echoed through the expanse of their hard-earned land. And underneath the vast expanse of sky, they stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that with courage and unity, nothing could push them out. The highwaymen had tried, but they had underestimated the heart of a farmer, and farmers, united with purpose, proved to be an unstoppable force. The sun hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the fields of Willow Creek. A warm breeze rustled the corn, whispering secrets that only the land seemed to know. But in the heart of that serene landscape stood Thomas Hawthorne, a farmer with weathered hands and a heart burdened by worry. As he surveyed the land he had tended for decades, an unsettling feeling crept over him. This was not just another day on the farm, something was coming. Just then, the distant thunder of hooves erupted from the shadows beyond the hills. Thomas's pulse quickened. He had heard the tales too many times, the stories of the highwaymen who roamed these parts, men who knew no mercy and left destruction in their wake. With sharpened breath, he turned to the small farmhouse where his family lived, weighing the urgency of his next move. As the riders emerged, the fading light glinted off their leather gear, each figure correspondingly sinister in the dimming twilight. Leading the pack was a tall man, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but the glint of his eyes pierced through the darkness, revealing a hunger for power that made Thomas's heart race. The man bellowed, laughter laced with mockery. "A little farm, a little man." "I won't let you take my land," Thomas shouted, trying to project strength he didn't fully feel. He gripped the shovel tightly, feeling it anchor him to the earth beneath his feet. The leader's laughter boomed as he stepped closer, flanked by his cronies who reveled in the fear that rippled through the air. "You've got guts, farmer, but guts won't save you from us." Thomas felt a surge of desperation. This was more than just a fight for his crops. It was his legacy, his family's future. Panic threatened to swallow him whole, but just as quickly, an idea flickered in his mind, a bold plan that could turn this situation around. He blurted out, surprising even himself with the audacity of his offer. The highwaymen paused, brows furrowing in uncertainty. The leader said, skepticism dripping from his words, "If I can find you before dawn, you leave my land for good. If not, you can take whatever you want," Thomas proposed, his voice unwavering. The leader leaned back, a smirk creeping onto his face. "This should be good. I know this land better than anyone. You think you're clever, but I know every hiding spot," Thomas replied, an edge of confidence hidden beneath the fear. The gang exchanged glances, weighing their options. Perhaps it was the boldness in Thomas's voice or the underlying threat they felt. Whatever it was, it sparked intrigue in the leader's eyes. "All right, old man," he said with a sneer. Thomas took a deep breath, counting aloud, 1, 2, as the highwaymen began to scatter, their laughter fading into the shadows. He shouted, his heart pounding with adrenaline. The air thrummed with tension, and as he dashed into the darkness, a sense of purpose ignited within him. This wasn't just a game, it was a battle for his livelihood. He moved quickly through the cornfields, the tall stalks towering over him, swaying gently in the wind as if urging him on. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye. A shadow darted behind a stack of hay bales near the barn. With a burst of speed, Thomas lunged forward, tackling the intruder to the ground. He exclaimed, dragging the trembling figure into the moonlight. It was the smallest of the highwaymen, wide-eyed and terrified. The man pleaded, but Thomas's resolve only strengthened. He replied, shoving the man back toward the group of bewildered highwaymen who were now lurking near the farmhouse, fear etched across their faces. The power dynamic was shifting, and Thomas could feel the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. With one caught, he pressed on, moving deeper into the darkness. He shouted, catching a second man trying to hide behind a tree. Relying on his knowledge of the area, he used the sounds of the evening to guide him, concentrating on every rustle and whisper. Determined, Thomas knew that every second counted. He sprinted into the woods, heart racing as he closed in on the final hiding spots. The scent of freshly turned earth filled the air as he moved through the shadows, instinct guiding him. Then, silence fell, thick and suffocating. He strained to listen, waiting for even the faintest rustle, and then just ahead he saw a dark shape darting behind the thicket. Thomas shouted, rushing forward, but as he emerged from the trees he realized it wasn't who he expected. Instead, it was the leader, a shadow of arrogance beginning to crack. Scar turned to run, but Thomas was faster, channeling his fear and fury into every step. He yelled, lunging forward and catching Scar by the collar. Scar spat, his bravado faltering as he faced the resolve of the farmer. "You came to steal from me, but you're the one who'll leave empty-handed," Thomas replied, feeling the power of control surge through him. As the moon hung high, illuminating the battle for the farm, Thomas led his captives back toward the barn. The remaining highwaymen had grown silent, realizing their fate. Thomas stood tall, holding Scar in front of him like a trophy of victory. "You didn't think I'd allow you to take what doesn't belong to you," he declared, voice fierce. "This land is mine." Around him, the sun began to rise, casting warm light over the fields as neighbors emerged from their homes. They had witnessed the struggle unfold, and now they stepped forward, their faces flushed with pride and admiration. Benjamin called out, heart swelling at the sight of his community rallying around him. In that moment, the highwaymen's arrogant facade shattered. They had come to bully a farmer, but they had found an entire village standing united behind him. The power had shifted, and fear was replaced by strength. Scar's expression twisted with disbelief, his anger morphing into a tinge of desperation. "We'll come back," he blustered, but the conviction in his voice faltered. "Maybe," Thomas replied, "but not today." With a final push, he released Scar, who stumbled back, the weight of defeat heavy on his shoulders. As Thomas and the townsfolk escorted the highwaymen off the property, cheers erupted, the echo of victory dancing like sunlight across the open fields. They had won this battle not just for Thomas, but for every farmer who had ever faced the threat of losing everything. "Together, we can keep this land safe," Thomas declared, feeling a surge of hope wash over him. Their voices rose in triumphant unity, and laughter swirled around the air like a triumphant song of resilience. But as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the fields in a golden glow, a sudden chilling laughter echoed from the distance. A dark silhouette appeared on the horizon, more figures riding hard, galloping towards them. Thomas's heart dropped and dread coiled in his gut. He shouted, tension tightening the air like a drawn bowstring. The homeowners positioned themselves between their fields and the approaching menace, holding their ground. As the riders drew near, the leader could be seen clearly, eyes blazing with a desire for vengeance. "You thought you could win. You should have known better. You've only stirred the hornet's nest," he roared, his voice a sonic thunderclap. Everything hung in the balance now. Uncertainty wrapped around Thomas like a heavy cloak, but in that moment he remembered the strength of his community. Fear threatened to drown him, but it was drowned out by the roar of resolve rising from those beside him. They would not go down easily, not today. A new plan was forming, but would it be enough? Could courage truly overcome the looming darkness as the riders charged forward with menacing speed? The sun shone bright, illuminating the impending storm. Thomas's heart raced as he prepared not just to protect the land, but to defend the spirit that had united them all. And that's when he knew this was a fight they would never back down from. The true battle was only just beginning.